The lawyer leaned forward across the table, his voice gentle in that particular way people use when they think you might not understand. "Mrs. Hartman, can you tell me what day of the week it is?" I looked at him, at the judge sitting above us with her reading glasses perched on her nose, at my son Brian on the other side of the courtroom with his wife Vanessa beside him, both of them wearing expressions of concern that would have been convincing if I didn't know better. "It's Thursday," I said. "October 17th, 2025. We're in courtroom 3B of the county courthouse. Your attorney Mitchell representing my son's petition for guardianship. And I'm here to prove that I'm sharper than everyone in this room thinks I am." The judge's eyebrow went up slightly. Mitchell smiled that patronizing smile, the kind that makes your skin crawl even when you know it's coming. He said something about no one questioning my intelligence, about family concern, about recent lapses in judgment and memory that I let him talk. My own lawyer, Catherine Park, had coached me on this.
Stay calm.
Let them present their case. Then we dismantle it piece by piece. I sat there in my good Navy suit, my hands folded in my lap, looking like exactly what they wanted me to look like, a confused old woman who needed protecting from herself. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that I'd been 3 steps ahead of them for the last 2 months and I'm 70 years old. I taught advanced mathematics at the university level for 35 years. I understand logic and proof and evidence better than anyone in this courtroom, and I'd calculated exactly how to beat them at their own game. Let me tell you how this started. How my own son tried to convince the world I was losing my mind, and how I proved him wrong. 6 months earlier, I was having the best year I'd had since Richard died, and my husband passed 5 years ago. Heart attack while he was reading the Sunday paper on a quiet Saturday morning, gone before the ambulance could arrive. For 3 years after that, I barely functioned. The house felt too big and too empty at the same time. The silence pressed against my ears until I thought I'd go mad from it. I went through all the motions of living without actually feeling alive in any of it, but somewhere around year 4, something shifted. I woke up one morning and realized I was angry, not at Richard for dying, but at myself for half-living. He would have hated seeing me like that, diminished and small, and waiting for nothing in particular. I started tutoring mathematics online.
Just a few students at first.
High schoolers struggling with calculus, college students who needed help with statistics. I'd set up my laptop in the home office Richard had built for me, the one with the big windows and good lighting and the whiteboard he'd mounted on the wall. Word spread the way it does. Within a year, I had 23 regular students from 6 different states. I worked from home in my comfortable chair with my coffee and my whiteboard and my reliable internet connection. My students' test scores improved dramatically. Parents would send me thank you emails that made me tear up. One mother called me a miracle worker because I'd helped her daughter understand trigonometry after 2 years of failing grades. I wasn't a miracle worker. I was just a teacher who still knew how to teach. I also joined an online competitive Sudoku league. Every Saturday morning at 9, I'd compete against people from around the world, solving increasingly complex puzzles against the clock. I was ranked in the top 50 nationally for my age bracket, which made me absurdly proud. My mind was sharp. Sharper than it had been in years, actually, because I was using it again for something beyond grief and grocery lists. I had routines. Coffee at 6 in the morning while I did the newspaper crossword puzzle. Tutoring sessions from 8 to noon. Lunch, then errands or working in my garden. More tutoring in the afternoon if I had students scheduled. Sudoku competitions on Saturdays. Dinner with friends on Wednesdays. I was 70 years old, and I was living. Really living. Brian would call every Sunday, like clockwork. We'd talk for 15, maybe 20 minutes. He'd tell me about his work at the consulting firm, about how his kids were doing at college, about surface-level things that didn't require either of us to be vulnerable. The conversations were pleasant enough but distant. After Richard died, Brian had pulled back from me. Not dramatically, just gradually. Fewer visits. Shorter phone calls. That careful, gentle tone people use around grief they don't know how to handle. But 6 months ago, something changed. He started coming by the house more often. Always with Vanessa. Always unannounced. And always with this look on his face, this expression I couldn't quite read, but that made my stomach tighten with unease. The first time, I was thrilled. I was in the middle of grading some practice problems, and the doorbell rang. There was Brian, and my heart lifted the way it always did when I saw my son, that I hugged him, but it felt stiff somehow. Like hugging someone who is braced for impact. Vanessa followed him in, and she smiled that tight smile she always gave me. She immediately started scanning my living room. Her gaze landed on the stack of books on my coffee table, the pile of mail I hadn't sorted yet, the coffee mug I'd left on the end table that morning. "Margaret," she said, drawing out my name, "the house looks lived in." Lived in meant messy. Lived in meant I wasn't keeping up with things the way she thought I should. "Well, I do live here," I'd said, keeping my voice light. "So, yes, it tends to look lived in." She'd laughed like I'd made a charming joke, but her eyes were still cataloging, still assessing. They stayed for an hour, and the whole time they asked strange questions. Had I been feeling okay? Was I remembering to pay my bills on time? Had I been eating properly? Was I getting confused about things? "I'm 70, not 7, I'd said. "I think I can manage to feed myself and pay my electric bill." "Of course, Mom," Brian had said quickly, that soothing tone he used. "We just worry. You're here all alone in this big house. We want to make sure you're okay." "I'm not alone. I have friends.
I have students.
I have a whole life." But I could see it in their faces. They didn't believe me. Or they didn't want to believe me. After they left, I stood in my living room feeling unsettled in a way I couldn't quite name. Like the air pressure had changed and a storm was coming, but I couldn't see the clouds yet. The next week, Brian called with a question that should have been innocuous, but somehow wasn't. "Mom, did you pay your electric bill this month?" I was making lunch, the phone wedged between my shoulder and ear. "Of course I did. I set up autopay years ago." "Why?" There was a pause. "Because I got a notice that said your account was past due." The knife stilled in my hand. "What notice? Why would you be getting notices about my electric bill?" "You put me as a backup contact, remember? In case something happened." I didn't remember that. But Richard had handled so much of the utility setup. Maybe I had. "Well, it's paid," I said. "You can check my bank statement if you don't believe me." "I'm not trying to upset you, Mom. I'm just concerned." That word, concerned. It started showing up in every conversation. I checked my bank account that afternoon. There they were, regular as clockwork. Electric company. Automatic withdrawal. Exactly the amount it had always been. Both months paid on time. I called Brian back. "The bills are paid. They're right here on my statement." "That's weird. The notice says," "I don't know what it says, but I'm paid up, Brian." But after I hung up, I stood in my kitchen with a feeling like cold water trickling down my spine. Something was wrong. I just couldn't see what it was yet. 2 weeks later, I couldn't find my car keys. I'd looked everywhere I normally kept them. The hook by the front door, the counter where I sometimes dropped them, the pocket of my jacket. Nothing. I searched for 20 minutes before I finally found them in the refrigerator, sitting on the shelf next to the milk. Like that was a perfectly normal place for keys to be. I stood there with the refrigerator door open, cold air washing over me, staring at those keys and trying to understand how they'd gotten there. I didn't remember putting them there. I would never put keys in the refrigerator. It made no sense, but there they were. Evidence of something I had no memory of doing. I told myself it was nothing. Everyone has moments like this. Everyone does things on autopilot sometimes. It didn't mean anything, except it kept happening. My reading glasses turned up in the bathroom cabinet instead of on my nightstand where I always left them. My phone appeared in the garden shed when I was certain. I'd left it charging in the kitchen. A carton of milk showed up in the pantry, going sour, even though I didn't remember buying milk. I was lactose intolerant. I didn't buy milk. Each incident by itself was small, explainable, but together they formed a pattern. A picture of someone who was losing track of things, forgetting what she'd done, putting items in nonsensical places. A picture of someone whose mind was failing. I started second-guessing everything. Had I put my keys in the refrigerator and just forgotten? Was I having these moments of confusion that I couldn't remember afterwards? The doubt crept in like water seeping through a crack. Small at first, but growing with each incident until I could feel it undermining everything I thought I knew about myself. Brian called that weekend. Mom, you missed your dentist appointment yesterday.
What? No, I didn't.
My appointment is next Tuesday.
It was yesterday, Mom.
Tuesday the 8th. They called me when you didn't show up. Brian, I have it written in my planner. Tuesday the 15th at 2 o'clock. Can you check your calendar? Please. I went in my planner, flipped to October. There was the dentist appointment, Tuesday the 8th. And it was crossed out in pen, with a note written beside it in handwriting that looked like mine. Rescheduled, confused about date. My hands started shaking. I stared at that crossed out appointment, at that note in my own handwriting, and I couldn't remember writing it. Couldn't remember calling to reschedule. Couldn't remember being confused about anything.
I
don't understand. I thought it was the 15th. It's okay, Mom. These things happen. We're just noticing it's happening more often. Have you thought about seeing someone? A doctor? There's nothing wrong with me, Brian. I know you don't want to think about it. But sometimes problems start in the brain, and we don't notice until it's too late. Brain health is important, Mom. My brain is fine. I teach calculus for 6 hours a day. I just won a regional Sudoku competition last weekend. That's great, Mom. Really? But word games are different from managing real life. Keeping track of appointments, paying bills, basic day-to-day functioning. Basic functioning. Like, I was a toddler learning to dress myself. I'm hanging up now. Mom, please don't be upset. We're trying to help. I hung up, but the seed was planted. The doubt was there, working its way through my thoughts like a weed, when Brian suggested bringing a doctor by for a casual checkup, just to ease everyone's minds. I agreed. Because part of me wanted confirmation. Part of me needed to hear a professional say that I was okay. That was my first mistake, doctor. Reynolds came on a Thursday afternoon. Brian and Vanessa were already there when he arrived, having let themselves in with the spare key. The doctor asked me simple questions. What day was it? Who was the president? I count backwards from 100 by sevens. I answered everything easily. But I could see Brian and Vanessa whispering to him, pulling him aside, telling him things I couldn't hear. When Dr. Reynolds came back, his expression had changed. More careful, more clinical. Mrs. Hartman, your son tells me you've been having some trouble lately. Missing appointments, forgetting conversations, misplacing things in unusual places. Everyone misplaces things occasionally, of course. But in combination with your age and your living situation, living alone at 70 can be challenging. These incidents can be early warning signs of something we need to monitor. I don't need monitoring. He smiled like I'd made a joke. I'd like to refer you to a neurologist. Dr. Patterson. Just for some cognitive testing. Standard procedure. Brian put his hand on my shoulder. Mom, please. For us. Just to be sure. I looked at my son. At his wife. At the doctor with his clipboard and his concerned expression. I was outnumbered. Fine, I said. I'll go. The neurologist appointment was 2 weeks later. Dr. Patterson asked me questions, gave me tests. Remember these words. Draw this clock. Spell world backwards. I did all of it easily. But then she called Brian into the room, and I had to sit there and listen while my son listed incident after incident. The missed appointments. The unpaid bills. The confusion. The items in strange places. The times I'd called him and not made sense, though I had no memory of those calls at all. Some of it was true, or true enough. Most of it was exaggerated. And some of it, I was becoming increasingly certain, hadn't happened at all, but it sounded convincing. When you string together 24 small incidents over 6 months, when you tell them in that worried son voice, it creates a narrative. A story about a woman whose mind is failing, Dr. Patterson asked me to wait in the waiting room while she spoke with Brian privately. I sat there for 20 minutes, knowing that in that exam room they were discussing me like I wasn't a person, but a problem to be solved. When Brian came out, his face was grave. Dr. Patterson thinks you're showing early signs of cognitive decline. She's recommending you consider moving to a place with more support. An assisted living community. Absolutely not. I'm not moving to a home. Mom, It's for your safety. I'm not going, Brian.
Ay fine. You're not fine.
You're forgetting things constantly. You've left the stove on twice. I did not leave the stove on. I don't remember that at all. That's exactly the problem, Mom. You don't remember. I was there both times. The kitchen full of smoke. You don't remember because you're having gaps. I stared at him, trying to pull up any memory of what he was describing. Nothing came. My mind was blank where that memory should have been, and that's when the real fear set in. Because if he was telling the truth, if these things had actually happened and I had no memory of them, then something was very wrong with me, or he was lying. That possibility flickered at the edge of my consciousness, but I pushed it away.
This was my son.
Why would he lie about something like this? I didn't know yet that the question wasn't whether he'd lie, but what he'd gain from lying. The breaking point came 3 weeks later, on an ordinary Tuesday that should have been unremarkable. I went to check my mail and found the mailbox completely empty. Not just empty of new mail, but cleaned out entirely. Even the junk mail that usually accumulated was gone. I stood there on my front porch staring into that empty mailbox, and something finally clicked. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't me misplacing things. Someone was taking my mail. Someone was intercepting it before I could see it. I walked 3 doors down to Helen's house and knocked. She answered in her gardening clothes, surprised to see me. Helen, I need to ask you something. Have you seen anyone taking mail from my mailbox? She looked uncomfortable, her eyes sliding away from mine before coming back. Margaret, I wasn't sure if I should say anything. Your son, Brian. I've seen him at your mailbox a few times. Early morning, before you're usually up. He has a key to the box. I assumed you knew. My chest went tight. How many times? 3 or 4 that I've noticed. Maybe more. Can I have my bank send statements to your address? Just temporarily. Helen didn't ask questions. She just nodded and wrote down her address for me. I went home and called my bank. Changed my mailing address to Helen's house. Did the same with my insurance company, my investment accounts, my credit card. If Brian was intercepting my mail, I needed to know what he didn't want me to see. Then I started going through my files systematically. I checked my online banking. Everything looked normal. Bills paid on time. Balance steady. But when I searched my email for communications from Brian, I found something that made my blood run cold. An email from 3 weeks ago that I'd apparently marked as read, but had no memory of reading. The subject line was, Mom's mail forwarding confirmation. I opened it. It was from the post office. Confirmation that a change of address request had been filed for Margaret Hartman, forwarding all mail to Brian's address. The form had been filed online, using my email address with a digital signature that was supposed to be mine, but I'd never filed that form. Never authorized that change. Someone had forged my signature. I called the post office immediately, canceled the forwarding, and drove there to pick up a copy of the original form. The signature was a digital approximation of mine, close enough to pass casual inspection, but I knew I hadn't made it. 3 days later, Helen handed me a stack of mail that had started arriving at her address. Bank statements, insurance documents, investment summaries, and one envelope from a law office I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a document titled, Petition for Emergency Guardianship. I read it standing in Helen's kitchen. The petition claimed that Margaret Hartman, age 70, was unable to manage her own affairs due to cognitive impairment and posed a danger to herself. It listed incident after incident: missed medical appointments, unpaid bills, dangerous behaviors, confusion about dates and times, memory loss affecting daily functioning. IT requested that the court grant Brian Hartman emergency guardianship over his mother's person and estate, giving him legal authority to make medical decisions, financial decisions, and living arrangement decisions on her behalf. The petition was dated 2 weeks ago. Filed with the court. Official. Moving forward with, or without my knowledge, MY's son was trying to take away my legal rights. And he'd been systematically building a case for months. I sat down at Helen's kitchen table because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. This wasn't concern. This was a campaign. But why? I called Brian. He didn't answer. I called again and again. Finally, he picked up. Why are you doing this? Silence. Then, in the background, I heard Vanessa. Just tell her. Tell me what? Brian's voice was barely audible. Vanessa thinks your neighborhood isn't safe. She thinks you should be somewhere nicer. We thought if you moved to a facility, we could sell your house, use the money for your care. There it was. They wanted my house. The house Richard and I had bought 43 years ago. Where I'd raised Brian. Where Richard had died. Where every room held memories I wasn't ready to let go of. I'm not selling my house. And I'm going to fight this petition. Mom, you don't have a choice. The petition is based on lies. I'm going to fight it. And I'm going to win. I hung up, then I sat down at my computer and started documenting everything. Every incident Brian had claimed. Every piece of evidence I had that contradicted him. I worked chronologically, methodically, the way I'd approached mathematical proofs for 35 years. The dentist appointment, confirmation email showing the original date, calendar showing someone had changed it. The unpaid bills, bank statements showing automatic payments processed on time. The confused phone calls, call logs showing no calls were made on those dates. The stove incident, tutoring platform records showing I was logged in conducting a session during the exact time he claimed I'd left the stove on. Pattern after pattern. Lie after lie, but I needed more than just proof that his claims were false. I needed proof that he was doing this deliberately. I set a trap. I bought a small voice-activated recorder. Tested it. Left it on my kitchen counter where it would record any conversation in that room. It was legal in my state. One-party consent. If I was part of the conversation, I could record it. Then I waited. Brian and Vanessa came by 2 days later. Unannounced. Let themselves in with Brian's key. I stayed in my bedroom. Door cracked just enough to hear that I heard them moving around the kitchen. Opening drawers. Moving things, then Vanessa's voice clear. Is this them? Yeah. Put them in the bathroom. Behind the towels. Brian, are you sure about this? She needs to see she can't manage. The hearing is in 2 weeks. We need more evidence. The recorder captured every word that I waited until they left. Then I checked. My reading glasses, which I deliberately left on the counter, were gone. Found them 15 minutes later in the bathroom cabinet. Behind the towels. Exactly where Vanessa had said, MY's son and his wife, admitting on tape that they were deliberately moving my belongings. Creating evidence. Gaslighting me intentionally. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Catherine Park specialized in elder law. I sat in her office and told her everything. Showed her my documentation. Let her hear the recording. Explained the forged mail forwarding form, the manufactured incidents, the systematic campaign. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me with something like fury in her eyes. Not at me. For me. Mrs. Hartman, do you know what gaslighting is? Making someone question their own reality. Exactly. And that's what's happening here. Your son and daughter-in-law have been systematically manipulating your environment to make you appear incompetent so they can gain legal control of your assets and your life. Can we stop them? We can. We will. But we need to prove 2 things. First, that you are cognitively sound and fully capable of managing your own affairs. Second, that they've been deliberately manufacturing evidence. Can you get an independent cognitive evaluation? From who? Everyone I've seen. Brian's already talked to them first. I work with a neuropsychologist, Dr. Okafor. She's expensive, but she's thorough, and she can't be influenced. $3,000 for a full evaluation. I didn't even blink. Set it up. As soon as possible. Dr. Okafor tested me for 6 hours over 2 days. Memory tests, logic puzzles, pattern recognition, executive function assessments, attention tests, language tests. Every possible measure of cognitive ability was evaluated and scored. It was exhausting. By the end of the 2nd day, my brain felt wrung out. But I'd done my best on everything. A week later, Dr. Okafor sent her report to Catherine. I went to her office to hear the results, bracing myself. Catherine slid the report across her desk with something that looked like satisfaction. You're going to want to read this. I picked it up. The summary was on the first page. Patient demonstrates cognitive abilities well within normal range for her age cohort across all assessed domains. Memory function shows no impairment. Executive function is excellent. Attention and concentration are above average. Language skills are superior. Patient shows no signs of dementia, mild cognitive impairment, or any neurological dysfunction. Cognitive test scores place patient in the 95th percentile for her age group. I looked up at Catherine. This says I'm fine. Better than fine. It says you're sharper than 95% of people your age. It says we're going to destroy their case in court. Catherine called witnesses who could testify to my competence. Dr. Patricia Chun, my former department chair. 3 of my students' parents. Each one agreed immediately. The hearing was set for 3 weeks away. The morning it arrived, I woke at 4:30. Made coffee in the dark and sat at the table where Richard and I had eaten breakfast for 40 years, trying to imagine how this day might end. I drove myself to the courthouse. Needed to arrive under my own power, needed everyone to see that I didn't require assistance. The courtroom was small, beige, bureaucratic. Brian and Vanessa sat on the left with their lawyer Mitchell. I sat on the right with Catherine. Judge Reeves entered. A woman in her 60s with reading glasses and an expression that suggested she'd seen every version of family dysfunction. Mr. Mitchell, proceed. Mitchell stood with practiced gravity. He explained that this was a difficult case, that Brian loved his mother deeply, that circumstances had forced this action. Then he called his witnesses. Dr. Reynolds appeared via video. The doctor who'd spent 20 minutes in my living room. Mitchell asked him to describe what he'd observed. Catherine's cross-examination was surgical. How long had he spent with me? 20 minutes. Had he conducted formal cognitive assessments?
No.
Had he reviewed my medical records?
No.
Had he spoken to me privately without Brian present?
No.
Had he verified any of Brian's reports?
No.
So your recommendation was based on a 20-minute conversation where the petitioner was present the entire time, and you had no independent verification. I relied on family reporting, which is standard practice. Standard when the reporting is accurate. Thank you, doctor. Dr. Patterson came next, the neurologist. Mitchell asked about her assessment and recommendations. Catherine asked what I'd scored on the cognitive screening. 28 out of 30, above normal threshold. Had she conducted a full evaluation? No, just a brief screening. Had she verified Brian's reports?
No.
Had she known I was teaching advanced mathematics to 23 students?
No.
Had she known I'd recently published an academic paper?
No.
So your assessment was based on a 15-minute screening test that Mrs. Hartman passed and unverified reports from one source. Dr. Patterson looked uncomfortable. Family members are generally reliable sources.
Generally.
Thank you, doctor. Then Mitchell called Brian. My son walked to the witness stand like he was going to an execution. His shoulders were tight, his face carefully controlled, his eyes fixed anywhere except on me. Mitchell took him through the story. The missed appointments, the items in strange places, the confusion, the dangerous behaviors. Brian's voice was quiet and controlled. He sounded sincere, like a devoted son making an impossible choice. Then Catherine stood for cross-examination. Mr. Hartman, how many times in the past 6 months have you entered your mother's home without her knowledge or permission? Brian shifted. Maybe 15 times. Did you move items in her home? I might have tidied up. Yes or no. Did you move items? Sometimes, yes. Did you contact your mother's tutoring clients without her permission? His face flushed. Yes, but yes or no? Yes. Did you forge your mother's signature to redirect her mail to your home? Silence stretched. Then, quietly, yes. So you created the problem you claimed to be solving. You intercepted her mail, then expressed concern that she was missing correspondence. You moved items in her home, then expressed concern that she was forgetting where she put things. That's not. Mr. Hartman, I'm going to play you a recording. Catherine nodded to the bailiff. The courtroom's audio system crackled to life. Then Brian's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. Vanessa. Is this them? Brian. Yeah. Put them in the bathroom. Behind the towels. Vanessa. Brian. Are you sure about this? Brian. She needs to see she can't manage. The hearing is in 2 weeks. We need more evidence. The silence after the recording ended was absolute. Brian's face drained of color. Vanessa stared at her hands. That's your voice, isn't it, Mr. Hartman? I can explain. You deliberately hid your mother's belongings to make her appear confused. You manufactured evidence to support this guardianship petition. Yes or no? His voice came out barely above a whisper. Yes. Catherine let that sit for a moment. If the court grants this petition, what were you planning to do with your mother's house? We thought, if she moved to an assisted living facility, we could sell the house to help pay for her care. Care she doesn't need. When's the last time you had a real conversation with your mother? Asked about her work? Her actual capabilities rather than your assumptions about her limitations. He didn't answer. No further questions. Mitchell called Vanessa next, but the damage was catastrophic. Her testimony was brief and defensive. She couldn't explain away the recording or the intercepted mail. Then it was our turn. Catherine called Dr. Chen first. My former department chair walked to the witness stand with confidence. Maggie is one of the sharpest minds I've encountered in 40 years of academic work. She taught advanced mathematics, published regularly, contributed to the field. Even in retirement, she stayed intellectually engaged. We co-authored a paper last year that was published in a peer-reviewed journal. I've observed zero cognitive decline. Mitchell's cross-examination was brief and ineffective. Dr. Chen was unimpeachable. Catherine called 3 of my students' parents. Each testified about my teaching abilities, my professionalism, my clear communication. One mentioned that Brian had called her 3 months earlier trying to undermine my credibility. Then Catherine called me and I walked to the witness stand feeling like I was moving through water. The bailiff swore me in. I sat down and looked at the judge. Catherine started gently. Asked me to describe my daily life. I told her about my tutoring sessions, my competitive Sudoku, my garden, my dinner with friends. I talked about waking up at 6 and being productive and engaged and living a full life. Do you feel you're cognitively impaired in any way?
No.
I feel clear.
Sharp. Capable.
I feel like myself. The incidents your son described, did those things happen? Some version of them happened.
But not the way he described.
I didn't put my keys in the freezer. Someone else did. I didn't miss appointments. They were changed in my calendar without my knowledge. I didn't leave the stove on. I have login records showing I was conducting a tutoring session at the exact time he claimed it happened. The incidents were real, but they were manufactured. And did it work? I paused. Almost. For a while, yes. When your own child tells you you're failing, you want to believe them. You think maybe they're seeing something you can't see. That's the cruelest part. They made me doubt the one thing I've always been able to trust, my own mind, my own perception of reality. Catherine handed me a document. Can you tell the court what this is? This is my neuropsychological evaluation from Dr. Okafor. 6 hours of comprehensive testing. And the results.
No impairment.
Scores in the 95th percentile for my age group. Not just normal. Superior in several domains. Catherine submitted the evaluation as evidence. Mrs. Hartman, do you want a relationship with your son going forward? I looked at Brian for the first time. He was staring at his hands. I don't know. That depends on whether he can acknowledge what he's done. He didn't just try to take away my house. He tried to take away my sense of self. My confidence in my own mind. I don't know if we can come back from that. Mitchell's cross-examination was half-hearted. There was nothing left to attack. Judge Reeves called a brief recess. 15 minutes that felt like hours. When we returned, she didn't waste time. She turned to Brian, her voice sharp with controlled anger. Mr. Hartman, what you've done here goes beyond poor judgment. You've systematically undermined your mother's confidence in her own mind. You've manufactured evidence. You've violated her privacy, sabotaged her livelihood, and attempted to strip her of her legal rights. Whether your motivations were genuine concern or not, your methods constitute elder abuse. Brian's head dropped. Judge Reeves turned to me. Mrs. Hartman, I find no evidence whatsoever that you require a guardian. The evidence suggests you're exceptionally capable. The petition for guardianship is denied. Relief flooded through me. Furthermore, I'm issuing a protective order. Mr. Hartman, you are to return intercepted mail, surrender your key to your mother's home, and have no contact except with her explicit permission. You are barred from filing further guardianship petitions without substantial new evidence reviewed by this court. She looked at Brian again. I'm not ordering a full restraining order at this time, but any further harassment will result in serious legal consequences. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Hartman, I apologize that you had to go through this. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down. IT was over. The courtroom emptied slowly. Catherine was talking to me about next steps, about filing paperwork, about what to do if Brian tried to contact me. But I was only half listening. My entire body felt strange, like I'd been holding myself rigid for weeks and suddenly all that tension had released at once that I'd won. I'd kept my life, my home, my autonomy, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow that I drove home to my house that was still mine, that would remain mine. Made tea and sat at the kitchen table, letting myself feel everything. Relief, anger, grief. That strange empty ache where my son used to be. Brian called that evening. I need to explain. There's nothing to explain. You tried to take my life away. I thought I was helping. Vanessa said you seemed confused. You let your wife decide my future. You manufactured evidence. That's not protection. That's control.
I'm weak. I've always been weak.
I take the path of least resistance. Brian, you tried to take away everything that makes me who I am. You made me question my own mind. Do you understand how devastating that is?
I'm sorry.
How do I fix this? I don't know if you can. I need time.
Space.
Respect the court order, and stay away until I'm ready. If I'm ever ready. I hung up. Then I cried. Not gentle tears, but the kind that shake your whole body. For the son I thought I had, for the relationship probably broken beyond repair, but also from relief. Because I'd fought back. Because I'd won. Over the next weeks, I started speaking to senior advocacy groups. Sharing my story. Helping others recognize the warning signs that I published an article in the local paper. When your family decides you're too old. My fight against elder gaslighting. It went viral locally. I got interview requests, calls from people experiencing the same thing. One woman gripped my hand and said, "My son has been doing this to me. I thought I was going crazy. But it's not me, is it?" "No," I told her. "It's not you." A month after the hearing, a publisher contacted me. They wanted a book, a guide for older adults facing family interference and guardianship abuse, that I said yes that I was 70 years old. I'd survived my husband's death, my son's betrayal, a legal battle for my own mind, and now I was going to help others survive the same thing. If this story resonates with you, if you've experienced something similar, leave a comment. Share your story. Your voice matters. Subscribe if you believe that competence doesn't have an age limit, that autonomy is a right, not a privilege that expires when you turn 70.